to take a look at what happened and really understand what we can do, because obviously this is not going to be the last time we're going to receive a tsunami advisory and an earthquake off the coast. To do so, though, we're going to have some different interviews here during this next half hour or so. We're going to hear from Oregon Emergency Management. We're going to hear from the Coast Guard. We're going to hear from Oregon State University, all about this and the important things that we can learn from this and be prepared for the next time. Starting off, though, we have our own Katie Zuniga, who's going to be joining us here from Fox 12 Weather. Katie, great to see you. And yeah, let's start talking about this here.
There may be a tsunami, and then there's kind of two ways that can go. We got the lower end of the scale here. We got an advisory, but there's also the higher end, and that's the warning. So that's why we're seeing some more intense impacts for Hawaii, whereas we are just going to see basically the most dangerous impacts directly on the beach or in the water, not a widespread.
Mic's closed.
We're going to continue to keep you updated, but we'll have the full force alert
Can I talk to you?
coming up in just a little bit.
Okay. Thanks, Peyton. Officials on the coast are advising people to take the necessary precautions as this.
I have everything coming back in my ear in like a half-second loop. My voice, everything from the controller.
Sergeant Christopher Gill, who's on the phone. Good evening to you, Sergeant. So what are you advising people to do right now?
Really, we're just echoing what everyone else is hearing. You know, stay off the beaches, off the harbors, marinas. Don't go to the shore to watch for waves. As exciting as it may seem, it's not really a smart idea. And then remain in a safe location, away from the beaches and away from the water until the advisory is lifted.
Yeah, we heard from one of our reporters, Sergeant, up in Seaside, so far to the north of you, who said that there's people out there with bonfires on the beach right now. So, what are your crews trying to do to make sure that the proper precautions are being taken? Are you going up and if there are people on the beach, talking to them one-on-one?
Yeah, we're having our people, along with our emergency management department here in Coos County, we're going to be going to the beach, making sure anybody that's out there, they're going to be telling them, hey, you need to get moving. We really just are encouraging people to stay off the beaches at this point.
And we've heard so much about what an advisory means, but what kind of impacts are you all told to expect?
Okay, thanks.
The most recent update I received was we were looking at in our Charleston area waves less than a foot. It really comes in handy that it's coming right after our low tide.
Yeah, that's a good timing indeed. All right, Sergeant Christopher Gill with the Coos County Sheriff's Office. We do appreciate it, and thanks for all the work you're doing down there. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so now let's get out to our crews out on the Oregon coast.
Now let's check in with Fox 12's Dylan Scott. He's live in Seaside, and he's been taking a look at how the area is preparing under this advisory. And Dylan, I would imagine that not everybody is taking it as seriously as they should.
Pete and Riel, good evening, and as you can see, I'll step out and give you a quick look here. There are some bonfires out on the beach here in Seaside. Now, these people have been warned plenty of times by Seaside Fire and Rescue and the National Weather Service about what potentially is coming, but they're far enough back right now that I don't think there is much concern for them out there. But most of the people have heeded that warning in terms of a tsunami advisory, and they've taken some precautions. They're much further back here in Seaside, back watching from the hotel rooms, out on the balconies, further back here on the sidewalk as well. Now, the expectation, again, is that 1 to 3 foot waves will reach the air sometime again between 11 p.m. and midnight. Now, right now, we can say that that tide is all the way out, so you really got to walk out about 100, 200 yards, 2 football fields or so to even get out to the ocean. We don't really see anybody out there right now, which is pretty good news, and that's really because you got to give credit to Seaside Fire and Rescue, really spending the whole afternoon along with the National Weather Service, warning those out here on the beaches about those dangerous forces that come with those 1 to 3 foot waves pushed by the earthquake, a lot stronger than normal there, so really something to pay attention to, like a giant sneaker wave per se. Now, many told us that they're taking extra precautions really the remainder of this evening.
Just advising people of what's going on, that we could expect a 1 to 3 foot wave this evening about midnight, and the advisory from everybody is to stay out of the water. And then let them make the choice. Some we have coming off the beach, some people we have staying on the beach.
But what's different about these waves is they have a lot more momentum and energy behind them, and it can push the water way up further and faster up the beach than you expect. So it's basically like a sneaker wave on steroids.
So some important notes right there. One additional note, there was a power outage unrelated here in Seaside, but the power went back on about 9 o'clock. So all those alerts and such coming back through again, all the lights and such on around us here. Again, if you're on the northern Oregon coast or here in Seaside, public safety officials say just stay away from the water. You don't really appreciate the power, the potency of these waves being pushed in from Russia and that earthquake as well. We'll continue to bring you updates every couple of hours here, every 30, every hour here as well on Fox 12 Oregon. But for now, in Seaside, Dylan Scott, Fox 12 Oregon.
Definitely good timing with that lower tide conditions. Dylan, thank you. We want to check
and see if you happen to be along the coastline where you can go and what you need to do to get out of that tsunami area and into something that's a bit more safe. So you can definitely do some research if you're concerned about any future trips. But, you know, talking with Mark, we haven't had anything like this. He said one time in his 30-year career, we've had one that's been this level. Everything else has just been kind of in a watch. Now that advisory, I wanted to hit this home with you just one more time, just so you remember. It was Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. There was until further notice, which we now know it has been done, and that was because it was capable of the strong currents or waves. It was dangerous near the water, but didn't expect anything. So in the future, if this comes up, that's kind of what you're looking for, is what level of things do we need to be looking at or walking through or watching for. The other thing we watched for was those wave heights. Now this is recalculating right now. So what we're looking at is these are the times at least that we had the higher waves that went through these buoy points. But it's important to know that specifically, I was making sure I had my facts straight. Here we go at that west of Newport, we have that buoy number 50. This one particularly, on average, it will see anywhere from about 4 to 5 foot height of waves throughout the summer. This is not much of a change from what we could potentially see during the summer. When we get into the winter, especially during king tides, we could see, you know, wave heights double this, up to 10 feet. So what we saw just over the last few hours didn't even come close to king tide waves. So it wasn't anything that we saw any imminent threat or anything most likely as to why there was never a warning issued there along the Oregon coast or anywhere on our part of the Cascades. Now, of course, I wanted to take just a quick moment to show you as we go through today and get into the week that our 7-day forecast, we're really not looking at any, you know, additional weather, anything that could come in, any strong troughs that are dropping through. We're paying attention mostly to the beginning of next week, where we could see, you know, some of the trough possibly come in and drop us down and give us some showers. But other than that, we're looking at some pretty mild, even a little cooler than average temperature. Greg?
All right, Katie, thank you so much. I mean, I do think, you know, that watch advisory warning thing, just reiterating that and getting that into everybody's heads. I mean, and this is me included, of understanding what those mean.
It's just like trying to get to understand the fire ones, you know, the ready, set, go, like what do each of those means, or the winter weather advisories. It's the same thing. We just don't see this one often enough for people to be familiar with it.
Yeah, but good for everybody to know, because obviously this is not going to be the last time that we have a tsunami warning or advisory or watch or whatever for the Oregon coast. So something definitely good for everybody to be familiar with and just understand what to do in those situations. Thanks so much, Katie. We might be checking back in with you here in just a little bit, but we are going here throughout the morning here just talking about this tsunami advisory. I do want to say that the tsunami advisory has been dropped, so just to make sure everybody knows that if you're joining us right now. But we want to continue to discuss this, and joining us right now, we have Jenna Tilt from Oregon State University to talk about just some of these, you know, some of the different things that we should be doing during these situations, and preparedness and knowing what to do. I believe we're going to have Jenna on here just in a second. Yeah, Jenna joining us right now. Thanks so much, Jenna, for being here with us today. I appreciate it. Now, from what I understand, you were just in some training yesterday. Is that right?
Yeah, I was out in Newport with sorry, I'm hearing a lot of background noise on there.
Oh, sorry. We're live in the newsroom, so there might be a little bit of noise coming through right there. Apologies for that.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I was out in Newport, Oregon, with the Newport Emergency Management and Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, who make our tsunami evacuation maps. And we were doing a mapping training with local residents about how we can make those maps more accessible and apparent to our community members, our coastal community members. And so while we were there, we were just starting the training that the first the watch came in, and then it was elevated from there. And so that was a great experience for all of us to be there and to reiterate the messages that you are sending out in terms of being prepared and knowing what those warnings and messages mean and being ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that is so important, talking about those maps and just understanding that along the Oregon coast. And so when you're doing that, you said you're consulting with the community. So what are some of the things that you do there as far as understanding, I mean, I think we all know, generally speaking, go to higher ground, but that can be a little complicated in an emergency situation when you have vehicles and a lot of people. So what are some of the different facets that you go through as far as getting somebody prepared and where to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, from what we experienced yesterday, with the distant tsunami from Russia, we have a lot of time, right? So you'll hear that watch and then advisory and warning, and it's time to get to high ground and heed those warnings. If it's a local generated earthquake and tsunami off the coast, your warning is the shaking. And as soon as that shaking stops, if you are in a low-lying area, like on the coast, on the beach, you need to get to high ground immediately. And so some of the things that residents are concerned about or don't know, think, I can take my car. The official guidance and the best advice is leave the car at home. You can see from past events, traffic jams, there'll be debris on the road. You want to move, if you can, as quickly as you can on your own 2 feet. So that's something that we hear a lot about. And the other thing that we try to tell and why we do these trainings is you need to practice. At the time of the event, the shaking, it's going to be really hard to find and read a map. And so the best thing to do if you live on the coast or if you're visiting the coast is know where you are, know where the high ground is, and just keep that in mind. And if you live out there, to practice that route from your home, from your work, and to the places that you go a lot.
Yeah, great idea just to be thinking about that and know what those paths are. And, I think when it comes down to that, you mentioned the vehicle thing, and that's honestly something I hadn't thought about. This is why we're talking about all this, so people can know for next time. But I would imagine that would also keep those roads clear for people who are unable to maybe walk up that hill, who do need a vehicle, that they can get up there as well. So if you can walk on your own feet, do that to get up the hill.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, well, for you now, now that you were doing the training yesterday, we've had this today. What comes next for you as far as any kind of preparedness? Did you learn anything from yesterday that will help you going forward, or was it just good practice of understanding where we're at right now?
Oh, we always learn a lot from all sorts of the different questions that residents have. One of the things that we were focused on yesterday was about the maps themselves, how we can make that message more simple and easy for residents and for our visitors to be able to understand the information. We have phones now a lot, so reading the paper map sometimes is a little bit more tricky for folks. So trying to make sure it's legible and folks can know what to do really quickly, and again, to practice, right? So no one's gonna be reading lots of maps if we have shaking and you need to get out of town, get to high ground as fast as you can. So taking that time to practice and making that message accessible to folks is really important to us.
Talking about that accessibility, just one more question for you, and sorry, I'm asking a bunch because I'm just really interested, and I think it's important for people to know. So when we're talking about those maps that are over at the coast, and I've seen those, is there an easy way for people to know where to go find those ones, at least the ones that are publicly posted, to know where to go look?
Yes, absolutely. There's lots of different websites. You can go to Oregon Emergency Management. There's Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, which is a kind of a mouthful to say, but they have the maps there too. I could send you the link. That might be the easiest for you, so you can post there. And there's some great resources there, including a fancy, you can, with a QR code, or you can type in your address and get a custom map built from your home or your workplace on the coast, right to where that high ground would be if we did have a local earthquake and tsunami, so you can practice that route.
Wow, that's incredible. So anybody over there, yeah, would definitely want to tap that up. Well, Jenna, thank you very much for joining us and for all that you do, to help people be prepared and study this. We appreciate your time and knowledge here. And thanks for being here on Fox 12 Now.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
And we've got more coverage here as we're going to be talking about this. We've got Oregon Emergency Management who's going to be joining us soon. We're also going to be talking to the Coast Guard here shortly. But I think first, we wanted to talk about just having, understanding what people are saying over there on the coast. So I think we've got something from from Kenzie Richmond. We've got Kenzie, from Kenzie, who is down in Newport, I believe, speaking to some residents there just about, what's going on. And I'm sure we have people from Newport watching, but let's go ahead and take a look at this.
It's been a calm morning here at the Newport Marina. Just a few small ripples in the water, as you can see, but the tsunami advisory is still in effect, and warning signs are still up around the marina. The strongest waves were expected between 11:40 and 11:55 last night, and so far, there's been no reported damage, but emergency officials say that doesn't mean the threat is over. There is still a potential to see dangerous waves and strong currents. Emergency manager Samantha Buckley says the key right now is staying out of low-lying areas like beaches, bays, and marinas until the advisory is lifted. We spoke with several fishermen and locals at the marina. They said they weren't too worried, but it was a different story for their loved ones watching from afar.
We were having relatives, one of the neighbors on another boat, his sister called and, are you all right? Are you on high ground? She was in panic mode, and he says, it's not supposed to hit here if it does till like 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock last night. And so what are you worried about? It's a wave.
We also met a couple from Nevada who came here to fish. They saw the alerts last night and knew about the advisory this morning, but decided to head out on the water anyway. So yes, folks in Newport are reporting no waves and no damage overnight, but the tsunami advisory remains in place this morning. Officials are urging you to stay off the dock, away from the marina and out of the water, and continue to follow alerts through tsunami.gov and your local emergency channels. In Newport, Mackenzie Richmond, Good Day, Oregon.
Mackenzie Richmond there, who went down there to Newport again, just hearing from people. And we've been hearing from a lot of people just about preparing for this and, what it's like going through that. Obviously, this situation is probably about the best that could happen when we go through something like this for right now. But being prepared going forward, something really important for everybody to know and to do. So I was just going to go through a couple of those things. If you are in one of those areas, as we were just talking about with Jenna, know where those maps are and know where to go. And I think this is important for people who are visiting the coast, which, a lot of us do. A lot of us like to go to the coast, but it's important to know that even when you get there, figure out where your hotel is and figure out where some of those routes are to get to. So good knowledge here and good things for us to know. We're also going to be joined right now, I believe, by Steve Stromer from the Coast Guard, who is here with us, and to talk about that as well. And Steve, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate your time in being here. And, I'm really interested from the Coast Guard's standpoint, what are some of the main things that you're doing when you see some of these advisories and the warnings and watches that come through, when it comes to tsunami, what are some of the first things the Coast Guard does?
Hey, not a problem, Greg. Thanks for having me. We really want to get out to the public, this situation and how dangerous it can become. So, last night when we got notified that a tsunami watch had been issued for the coastal areas, we put out on Twitter and Facebook right away. The most important thing is to have those, don't head to the coast. Listen to the weather forecast, listen to the local news, see what, is going to happen. Don't panic, start looking at access routes to get to higher ground. But the biggest thing is we just did not want anybody going to the coast to try and see this.
Yeah, and definitely something to be concerned with people, heading out there, because I know that sometimes you can get people who want to go down and see the water coming out or watch what's going to happen. Obviously a dangerous thing. I did have a question too, just about vessels. There's a lot of people that go fishing off the Oregon coast. Say a warning like this does come in and maybe it's a little bit more immediate. If somebody's out there on the water fishing, what is the best thing for them to do in that situation if they get a warning and say it's not a whole lot of time to react to it?
Yeah. To be 100% honest, if they're already underway and offshore, at the best and safest thing to do is stay offshore. When those vessels and when you're, coming in closer to land, and same thing for the tsunami, that when it does get close, that's when it builds up the momentum, and then that wave actually happens because, it's shallower conditions and it can build up and come onto land. So if you have a boat and you're a boater and you're offshore, stay offshore. Obviously, one of the most paramount things is making sure your friends and family are safe as well. And if we have communication to try and do that. A lot of people, if they're boaters, they're going to be worried about that. And those boats can also become projectiles if a tsunami were to come in, which is another reason why we ask people to stay away from those harbors and marinas. A lot of the footage that we're looking at now is that wave difference, or I should say the high and low tide that has occurred at a more exaggerated scale due to the tsunami that did happen yesterday. Or I should say the wave differences, not the tsunami.
Yeah, the wave differences that are happening because of that. So that's fascinating too, and seeing just how many different ways that can really affect things. For people who are on the beach, as you mentioned, don't go there if you know that there's a watch and effect or one of the warning systems. I think another question I have for you though is, now that we had this, and this at least is kind of a good preparation, I think, for what could come, because down the line, surely we're going to have another one. And, from this, what did you learn from this? Did you learn anything as far as preparedness or different things that, from the Coast Guard standpoint, that you could do or do differently based on what happened?
One of the biggest things is just have a plan. Whether you're, especially if you're local to the area, know your routes out of here, and get to higher ground quickly. But also if you're going to be a tourist, and this is obviously prime time for tourism, be mindful of those tsunami zones. When you're entering a tsunami area, when you're leaving it, because that, especially looking at Hawaii, those roadways got pretty heavily trafficked quickly when they were told to get to higher ground. So as soon as you see an advisory or a watch come in, just get away from the water, wait till some, further recommendations are given to the public. And especially, I will highlight this one was sort of unique because some of the wave predictions came in and they were saying towards the hours of, late 11 p.m., midnight. If you were to go to the beach at that time, you can't see A, the wave, and B, you wouldn't be able to see any of those logs or projectiles that could get sucked out with the wave that would, also potentially take you out to sea.
Yeah, a very important thing to think about. Yeah, those projectiles. And I know there was a video circulating from earlier this year, I believe, from a woman who was over at the coast and a big log came in. She was thankfully very lucky, got out of that. But yeah, a good reminder there. There's lots of different ways that could harm you. So just bottom line, it sounds like get away from the ocean, if that's coming.
Yeah, correct. It's very similar to like how hurricanes are for the Coast Guard. Our paramount thing is going to be safety to our own crews and our own families in the Coast Guard. So sometimes, if something like this can happen, our paramount thing is getting them to safety. So we might not have those assets. And if you get swept out to sea, you can be taken hundreds of yards offshore and dealing with some very strong currents. Again, people were saying, it can only be maybe 1 foot. That still, doesn't matter because those currents can be really strong and it's unpredictable.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point there too, because you do look at that and think, oh, it's a foot. That doesn't seem like that much, but there's a whole lot of power behind that as well. For people to be really paying attention to. Well, Steve, anything else that you think is important for people to know?
No, again, we're really glad that we were able to, get the word out there, and a lot of the other partner agencies were able to get that word out there, whether it was, NOAA or, Pacific County, Oregon Emergency Management. They were all able to get, the word out pretty quickly, and we're glad that people heeded those warnings. And now I hope this is kind of a wake-up call for people to get those preparedness kits, to look at those plans to, evacuate if this does become a warning in the future.
Yeah, great advice right there. Well, thank you very much for joining us here today. Thanks for all that you do for helping people out in these situations and just, again, preparing. Everybody can get prepared now. This is a good wake-up call if you weren't for what could come in the future. So Good to be doing that. Steve, thank you very much for joining us.
Not a problem. Thank you, Greg. Have a good day.
You too. And again, so we are here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, just talking about the advisory and watch that came through yesterday. I do want to say this. This is confirmed that the advisory has been canceled, so letting you know that that is the case. But we're learning about different things that we can do to be prepared here in the future. We do have Katie Zuniga from Fox 12 Weather joining us right now, too. We're going to hear from Oregon Emergency Management also in just a little bit. But Katie, I believe, is here with us. And there she is. Hi, Katie. So yeah, just talking about all this and reiterating to people, you know, some of the important things that they should know in these situations.
Yeah, so some of the things, that a lot of the questions I've been receiving since I've been in here this morning is just kind of how are these generated? What's the difference between a wave and a swell and those sort of things? And so I wanted to show you this particular tsunami, how this one was formed. Is we had an earthquake that happened, and that did take its time and displace the water, moving it up. So we had those plates rub together, causing the earthquake underwater, and that caused that vertical push of the seawater. And then as that water moves along and goes toward the shoreline, it spreads and into a shallower waters, and it grows in its height. So that's where that wave coming in, and we were watching the buoys very closely that we have access to, you know, off the Oregon coast to see what were the changes as it was expected to peak, you know, around midnight last night. And I do have some of those observations to share with you in a moment. Now, the different types of waves that we do have, we have wind waves. Those are surface only, and those are ones that if there's no wind, there's no wave. So that's the ones that you typically think of and that you see moving there across the water. The tsunami waves can be created by a few different things. This one that we just had is that seismic sea wave, and that was because it was created by an earthquake. You can also have volcanic eruptions, you can have landslides, or you can have storms. And those are all the different ways that these tsunamis can be created. A couple other things, there's a few more than this, but the ones that you would probably recognize would be tidal waves. Those are created by that gravitational pull of the sun and the moon. And then storm surge, and that's that atmospheric pressure and wind from storms. So those are kind of the more common, more basic that you would expect, the type of waves that you would hear about or see or think of when you're thinking of the different type of waves. So here's where we had the advisory that we were watching for today. And you'll notice as we go through, we had this all lined out for you as the advisory was in place, showing how far in. There were some areas like Astoria where that advisory went in a little farther, and then you would move down the coast and it wouldn't be quite as far. Then you would get into Newport, it would go out again, and then it would come back in. But one thing to note is that it has not been lifted yet from the northern part of the coast there. So we're not looking at it actually being, you know, anything that we need to worry about right now, but it is down there. And then Greg, this is one more time just for you. You were asking about the difference between watches, advisories, and warnings. So just really quick, a watch, be prepared, watch the information, no action needed. At advisory, which we were in, stay out of the water, stay off the beach, but no widespread threat. And then that warning, take action, get out of there, get to higher ground.
Yeah, great reminder of what each one of those are and what each one means and to know what to do. Katie, thank you so much. And we are continuing here just our coverage of this. We're going to talk a little bit more about preparedness and what to do in these situations. We have Althea Rizzo from the Oregon Department of Emergency Management joining us. Thank you very much for being here with us. And just talking about the situation right now, I'd love to hear from your standpoint how you felt things went and where we're at, you know, in this situation right now.
Yes, so the earthquake did cause Oregon to be under an advisory, and we did receive a tsunami. I believe that some of the highest amplitudes and heights were recorded in Port Orford, slightly under 2 feet. So this means that there's strong currents in bays and harbors, but we're not expecting to see water come on dry land. And this is a great reminder that, you know, Oregon can get very large tsunamis from both distant sources, like in Japan and Alaska, or from the Cascadia subduction zone, which is just a little ways off of our coast.
Yeah, something that's, you know, could easily happen here in the future. I think, well, will happen at some point. It's kind of inevitable when that will happen. That's another question. But a good chance for everybody to think through this and be prepared. And, you know, for individuals out there who are at the, maybe live at the Oregon coast, they might be a little bit more prepared. But people like the rest of us who don't live there, who visit quite a bit, what are some important things that you can know and be prepared for when you go visit the Oregon coast, just to have this in the back of your mind that this could happen at some point?
Yes, so that's a really good question. The one thing that I really recommend people do before they go over to the coast is to look at the tsunami evacuation maps and find out if the hotel or rental you're staying at is in the evacuation zone. Because, you know, if you're not in the evacuation zone, that's great. And if something does happen, you know that you do not have to leave wherever it is that you are. You can find these maps online. And then when you get there, practice the route so you know where to go if something happens, because it could be the middle of the night, like often happens with tsunamis. And we want to make sure that kind of people think about what hazards might be there, but then do the preparedness and then relax and enjoy the beach.
Yeah, but have that in the back of your mind and just know that, and then you can rest easy if you need to call upon that knowledge. One question I did have for you, and you know, when you see what was going on in Hawaii, you see that they have the, you know, the sirens and the warning systems in place there. Is that something that would be in place, or what would it take for something like that to happen on the Oregon coast, as far as any kind of an air warning or a sound warning?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So sirens are one of the tools that we use for alerting, and they're useful when you have a population that's outside frequently. On the Oregon coast, the siren's sound doesn't travel very far. So in places where you have a lot of tourists outside, or it's a beach where there's not good cell service, sirens can be a great tool. They are expensive to put in and expensive to maintain, but they are a tool that has a specific use. We really recommend that people sign up for cell phone alerts by going to oralert.org and signing up for your local alerts to get to your cell phone. And if you're going over to the coast, if you're going to Clatsop County, for instance, for Seaside, you can sign up for Clatsop County alerts so that if something does happen while you are there, you do get the alerts.
Interesting. So OR alerts, again, what was that website? I'm sorry, one more time.
oralert.org.
oralert.org. So that's great. And that's something anybody can go there, sign up, and then we'll get a notification in the event of something happening. That's great information right there. Again, you know, preparing for these potential emergencies that could happen down the line and in the event of an earthquake or a tsunami that could happen here at some point. Anything else that you think is really important just for people to know about that preparedness, or about even what had just happened here?
Yeah, so we were lucky in that it was a fairly small tsunami. Oregon has not had a lot of damage from this. California did receive a lot of damage, but tsunamis can happen at any time, and that's why preparedness is really important. You know, thinking about food, thinking about water, and you know, it's not the only hazard we have to deal with. We have wildland fires, we have flooding. So preparedness is really important. And there are lots of resources online to get that information.
Well, Althea, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and appreciate your input and understanding and knowing of what's going on here, and getting this information out to everybody about this. And I think, you know, we're all thankful nothing too terrible happened here, and it's a good chance for everybody to be prepared and start thinking about that. Thanks for joining us here on Fox 12 Now. And again, thanks to all of you who are joining us right now. We've got some more information here coming up. We're going to continue just talking about this. I do want to remind everybody, too, the tsunami advisory has been canceled, as you can see right there. So that's important to know. It doesn't mean that you still shouldn't be just prepared and understanding of the situation down there. Now, that's for the Oregon side here. If you head to Southern Oregon and into Northern California, the last we checked, that was not lifted down there. So just be aware of that, depending on where you're watching. Check with local authorities. And I think that's one of the big things that we're learning here throughout this broadcast is being prepared, understanding what these different things mean, understanding where the map is. So if you do go to the Oregon coast, understanding where your evacuation route is. You know, knowing in the event that happens, which it's not extremely likely, but it's not it's not impossible. There's not a zero chance. I mean, this will happen again. So knowing where those routes are, and just taking that minute, and I'm saying this to myself too, when you go stay at the Oregon coast, to take a minute and just go, okay, here's where I am. am I in an evacuation zone? If something were to happen, where do I go? Okay, everybody knows, make sure the whole family knows if that happens, where to head to. And then, as we were talking about earlier, I think it was Althea, and then go about and have a good time, enjoy the Oregon coast. But knowing that ahead of time is going to be really, really important. And there's also some different ways that you can get a custom map depending on where you're at of an evacuation route, so knowing those situations. And as we were talking to the Coast Guard, just staying away from the coast. If one of these warnings comes through, stay away. Don't head out there, because that's probably not a good situation. You could be clogging the roads. I think another really important lesson from today as well was, we were talking to Jenna there at the beginning, is don't use your car if you don't need it during an emergency evacuation, when you're getting to that high ground, whatever that evacuation route is, because of the fact that cars can clog the roads. She mentioned if this were a real emergency situation, cars become projectiles, you could become stuck in your car. And also, as far as clogging the road side of things, for people who are unable to walk or physically, or are unable to physically get up the hill to wherever that evacuation zone is, that's making it nearly impossible for them to get out if the road is clogged. So I think that's a really good lesson. And again, the bottom line here from this, tsunami advisory canceled. So good to know that, but good lesson for all of us and for practice to know what to do in these situations. And that's what we've been trying to bring you here with this. We have, of course, have more at kptv.com of all of this coverage. And during these situations, we'll be here to get you as much information as possible and bring you the up-to-date facts, whatever that may be. I do recommend downloading the Fox 12 Oregon app. That's another way that we can send out notifications to you as well, and at least speak to some of these different authorities in the different areas, as we've been doing during this broadcast. So I do, thank all of them for joining us and for being a part of this. I think actually we are going to speak to one more right now. We've got Aaron Zeisett, I believe, who's joining us, who's going to be joining us here in just a minute to talk about a little bit more of the situation and just, what we can do to be prepared, but also understanding what just happened. So I think Aaron's joining us right now. Aaron, thanks so much for being here on Fox 12 Now. I always appreciate you joining and to talk about these different situations. And
of course.
I would love to know from your standpoint. I mean, since thankfully, nothing too crazy happened during this one, but a good lesson, I think, for everybody. So from your standpoint, what were some of the lessons that you're taking away from this situation?
Well, we haven't had a chance to do our what we call hot wash, which is where we review everything that went right and went wrong, what we can learn for the future. We do that after any incident, large or small. So we haven't had a chance to do that yet. I think that some of the things that we did really well is we responded immediately, when the alert came in from NOAA, and we gathered together our local partners. We had a briefing and were able to decide what the actual risk was to the public. Our goal with alerting is always to get the right information to the right people at the right time so that they can make good, informed safety decisions about their families. We don't want to alarm people. We don't want people to feel like we're overreacting or that they need to overreact. So in this particular instance, the tsunami was coming from a long distance away. The earthquake happened in Russia. So NOAA was able to track it for a good chunk of time and kind of get a pretty good idea of where it was going to hit landfall, how deep it was going to be, where the areas were highest at risk. And that's where you see those different warnings coming in from NOAA that we then pass on to the public. You have the tsunami warning, which is the absolute highest one. That means get to high ground, just go. Tsunami advisory, which is what we were under, is mostly stay away from the water. The water can be kind of dangerous. The thing about tsunami waves is that they're not like typical waves that we encounter if we're surfing or we're just playing in the water and wading in the water. It is actually the ocean moving. So if you think in terms of if you slosh a bathtub and that wave comes out because you've displaced it in some way, or you slosh a bucket, that is what's happening in the ocean. It's not the same as those surface waves that happen because of weather or because of the tidal waves of the moon and things like that. So that it's a much heavier wave. And one of the things that we want people to be aware of is even now, that the advisory has been lifted along the coast, those waves that are coming in are still stronger waves. Those currents are a lot stronger. And so if you're in the harbors, if you're in the estuaries, if you're near the water, be aware of the fact that those waves are really strong. They're very powerful, and even really strong swimmers can get caught up in them. And once you get caught up in a tsunami wave, getting out is pretty hard. And also be aware that there's a lot of debris coming in, and there's a lot of debris in those waves. So logs and things like that are a hazard.
Yeah, I mean, and those are projectile missiles essentially that are
Yeah.
could be coming at you. You know, when you look at some of the sizes of those logs that could be there, or any other debris out there.
And it's always good. It's always good whenever you're at the coast to be aware of what the ocean is doing. And the coast is hazardous. It's beautiful, but the ocean is very powerful. And so just knowing what your risks are, we don't want people to not go to the coast. We don't want people to be alarmed. We just want them to be safe and aware of their hazards and their risks.
Yeah, that be prepared, be aware, and then enjoy yourself. But
Yeah.
know in the back of your mind, you know, just if that situation were to arise and just what some of those dangers are. And I think that is really important information. You know, one other thing I was going to ask you too is, you know, you see on these advisories or different, you know, whatever it may be, but talking about the waves themselves, you know, when people say, oh, it's, you know, a 5-foot wave versus a 1 foot, or even if it's in meters, you know, whatever it may be, like say it's a 1 foot wave, can that still potentially cause some damage and be a hazard?
It absolutely can. One of the things that we look at with tsunamis is if there's going to be an inundation, which is what we talk about that's when the water comes way in and starts hitting buildings and things like that. And we see this sometimes even with smaller waves. There's some social media videos out there of these small tsunami waves, and people are like, oh, look, a tsunami wave. Oh, that's a normal wave. And then it just keeps coming. And they're like, oh no. And it keeps coming. And they're like, oh no. And then they start running. Right. Yeah. So that's an inundation. We weren't expecting much of that with this. It does raise the level at high tide and things like that a little bit more than usual. Again, it makes the currents more unpredictable, especially for people who spend a lot of time in the water and can read the currents real well, or really strong swimmers. Maybe they get a little overconfident. These waves are not the same as the stuff that you're typically working with. So we look at that. So yeah, those 2 foot, those 1 foot waves can be dangerous. And like I said, it's a wall of deep water that is moving towards the shore. This isn't like a standard wave that people go surfing. And it's very powerful, and there's a lot of weight behind it. And so you have a lot of energy behind that wave that can move things. And so it may look like, oh, that's just a 1 foot wave, but then it hits you and you're like, that is not a 1 foot wave.
That is not the 1 foot wave that I'm used to there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that power behind something like that.
Yeah.
Really.
So it's really important that people take it seriously. Even in the next few days, one of the things that we're advising now, you know, the advisory's been lifted, go down to the water, you know, enjoy the beach, but just be aware of the debris, be aware of how strong the waves are and how strong and unpredictable the currents are. And of course, as always, don't turn your back to the wave and don't mess around on logs. And that's just like basic safety stuff when you're at the coast.
Yeah, basic safety stuff, but still sometimes you see people ignoring some of those things. So it's...
Well, yeah, and that's always the thing, right? We give people the best information we can. They're free to make their own decisions about things. You know, we tell them not to go to the beach. If they go to the beach, they make those decisions for themselves. We're always going to give people the best, the most actionable information, and try to help them be situationally aware. So one of the things we also want folks to do when they're going to the coast is make sure they're signed up for local alerts there, and also they know the evacuation routes. Like if you're in a tsunami zone, do a quick span and be like, okay, where does the tsunami zone end? What am I going to do if the ground shakes and I'm standing on the beach? How am I going to get my family away from the water and to high ground, and what route am I going to take? It takes 2 seconds. Just have a little quick plan in the back of your head and then go enjoy your day, because you will know in the moment, oh, the ground just shook. I need to get to high ground. Okay, kids, let's go. And you go. So. Yeah,
not sitting there trying to look it up online or to figure out something in that kind of an emergency situation. Just
exactly
have that, go through it with the family, go through it with your friends. Just be like, okay, if this happens.
Situational awareness.
Yeah, this is where we go. And then again, go about it, you know, go about your day, have a good time. But
and that's the case wherever you go, right? Anywhere in Oregon, we have a gorgeous state, and anywhere you go in Oregon, you should be aware of what the hazards are. Are there bears in your area? Is there wildfires happening? Is there a storm rolling in? What's the weather prediction? Know what your hazards are, have a plan so that everybody can get out and get safe, and you know, make sure that you're signed up for Oregon alerts. That's tied to your zip code. It's tied to a zip code. But if I'm visiting an area like Bend, or if I'm visiting the coast and I'm going to be there for a few days, I will go and I'll sign up for their alerts as well, because you can unsign up for them too, so that I'm getting their alerts based on the zip code that I'm going to be in. The other types of alerts that are out there are the wireless emergency alerts. These are the ones that we most commonly get when we get Amber alerts. So those are pushed out through the national system. And if it were a situation where the tsunami was coming directly at us and it was going to be really fast, most likely that kind of alert would go out, and the warning that's like, go now, get to high ground. In Oregon, most of the tsunamis that hit us have a lot of lead time. They're distant tsunamis. And so we have a lot of time. We have quite a few hours to warn people which areas they should stay out of. And the modeling is getting a lot better. The sensors are getting better. They're getting better at predicting the behavior of these waves. But of course, the thing that everybody talks about with tsunamis is it's the Cascadia subduction zone. If there's the big one happens off the coast, the reality of the situation in that is your warning is that the ground just shook. And so you need to get to high ground.
Yeah, that was going to be the question I was going to ask. Like, in the event of that one, which, you know, we cover that so much because obviously we know sometime that is going to happen, whether that's in our lifetimes or not, who knows? It could happen tomorrow, could happen 100 years from now. But when it does happen, it's going to be a very big deal for all kinds of things. So that's when, if you feel shaking, get to high ground.
Exactly. And that's the case anytime you're on the coast, anywhere in the world. If the ground shakes, get away from the water. Just get away from the water.
Get out of there. Erin, anything else that you think is important for people to know?
One of the things that we really just want to reinforce is that in incidences like this, when you maybe hear an alert went out and you want more information, do not call 911. 911 is not an information hotline. It is there to get emergency response in life or death situations. There are non-emergency numbers that are published by emergency managements, by sheriff's offices, by police. You can call that line. You can also go, in the case of a tsunami, go to tsunami.gov and you can look at the actual alerts that we're getting that everybody else is seeing. So, you know, don't inundate 911 unless it's a life or death situation and you need aid.
Gotcha. Very important for people to know. So a lot of really good information here. Thank you so much, as always, you know, for joining here and just getting this out to everybody. And we are in the situation where it's actually kind of good, and everybody can take a second and be like, okay,
it's good practice.
Now that happened, let's make sure we're ready for something real that, well, I mean, not that this wasn't real, but, you know, for something bigger that could occur. So getting that preparedness and understanding that. Erin, thank you so much for joining us here on Fox 12 Now.
Thank you. You guys have a good day.
You too. And again, thank you to everybody, too, for joining us here on Fox 12 Now. So this is, if you're first time watching, we live stream here every weekday, usually at 11 a.m., continuing off from Good Day Oregon, but also at 1 p.m. we have lots of programming that we do throughout the afternoon as well. But breaking news is something you can always go to here to us for this. Outside of our regular newscasts, this is the place to go. So that Fox 12 Oregon app is a good one to have on hand. And we'll let you know if there's something big happening, breaking news. And then we also have plenty of other content here for you as well under that Fox 12 Now tab. But lots here to go through today. I do want to just reiterate the tsunami advisory canceled. I'm reading it right here. So that advisory has been canceled, at least for this part of Oregon. If you get into Northern California, there's you'll want to double check that if you're heading down there. But a lot of really good information here. Preparedness being one of the big takeaways. Know where those the evacuation routes are. Know what to do in that situation, and then enjoy the Oregon coast. But be prepared in the event of that. All right, we're going to go ahead and sign off here, and our new news is coming up here in just a few minutes, so you can continue watching on the app if that's where you're watching. If you're on another platform, thanks for doing so. I'll be back at 1 o'clock as well with a whole slate of programming, so we've got plenty more coming up. But thank you for